Kind of two things, kind of FYI. The reason Judy's not with me this morning is she's home with an earache. And those of you who've ever had earaches, that is about the most
miserable,
hurtful thing you can have, and yet to not be life-threatening, but you think it is. The other thing is that I discovered this week, I'm not the only person in the world that uses worldview. Jim's son, this one's, Daniel. He has a blog, and his blog for a recent week, I don't know if it's this week or last week or 2 weeks ago, it was dealing with be looking with, and we looked in lesson 6. We looked at the who should I worship, and there are a lot of worldviews, and some of them honor the God of the Bible, and some of them don't, and some of them honor a deity, and some of them don't honor any deity at all. Now, if you go to slide 2, Gary. Now, I know you can't read it, but at the center of this is a worldview map. You see, it's real simple. Since it's all mental, the physical representation of it's real simple, and you can't read what's in the center because black on black just doesn't show up. But it does say, what should I worship? And I didn't catch that until I'd already printed all this. And
I think you did a good job. That's pretty good.
that's why.
Well, on the paper,
it's black and black. I don't know. I can't see up there, so don't know what it says. But anyway, we're going to look at our worldview as to what we believe about living things and non-living things. And so we want to go to slide number 3. And you don't have to look at the screen. You can look right here on the table. Because here on the table I have 2 things. And we're going to talk about these 2 things and the differences between them. And but if you can't see what's on the table, you can see what's on the screen. So what do we have here? A rock and a plant. And all right, tell me about these things. How do they differ?
Well, the plant is living.
The plant is living, and the rock is
dead.
We say it's dead. It's not living.
Not growing.
And so the living can do what? What can that living organism do? What else?
Grow, produce,
Well, how's it going to do all that? It has to draw sustenance. So it can draw sustenance from its environment and all of those things. Now, why can the living organism do those things and the rock can't?
God, it's been created to do that.
Well, that all sounds good and great, but how was it created? What about the creation enables it to do the things that a living organism does?
It's programmed to do that.
That's one way of saying it. It is programmed. Because what does it?
Vegetable and mineral and, you know, minerals do one thing and vegetables do another thing.
Well, how would you describe that? If you wanted to just simplify it, get it down to just a statement, make it where you could explain it to a 3-year-old, what would you say?
Just say God did it. That's what I did when I had 3-year-olds.
Well, all right. The living organism contains something that the rock doesn't.
DNA and RNA.
And, well, let's just simplify it further than that. That's true. But they are information. The living organism can do what a plant or what a living organism is supposed to do because it contains information. And in fact, you can explain all of the differences between living organisms and non-living objects by the simple statement, the living organisms contain information. So we have gotten fancy, you know, we call it DNA. Does anybody know what DNA stands for? Deoxyribonucleic acid. That's and RNA is ribonucleic acid. Now, it's kind of important to know that the information's there, and it's there in the very simplest living organisms we know anything about. And there's the argument about where living organisms start, and the best way to answer that, they start with where the information starts. Viruses and bacteriophages, which are smaller than bacteria, but they're not viruses, are living organisms. And they contain information. The fact that it's the fact that we know that has become the way we create vaccines nowadays. We call it messenger RNA, and that all it means is that somebody's messed with the information in that organism and changed it so it doesn't do the bad stuff we don't want it to do. That was as convoluted as all get out. Somebody tell me what I said.
God did it.
Well,
Man in like Frankenstein.
no, not quite, but almost. You know, at least that far back and even further, man has tried to figure out how life comes into existence without taking God into account. If you go all the way back to those ancient Greeks that Dan was writing about, the one I know about is Aristotle, because there's a few of his sayings. Aristotle didn't write anything, because they didn't write when Aristotle was roaming around raising Cain. He told everything to Plato, and Plato wrote it down years later. But he thought life originated spontaneously. So if you came up on a pond, a small pond, and it had a lot of leaves that had fallen into the pond, and over there were some tadpoles, then the tadpoles must have come from the leaves because they were together. It wasn't up until a man named Louis Pasteur that they really established that that could not happen. And if you ever took a microbiology course or bacteriology course or whatever, you know his experiment of the unusual looking flask that had the lip that comes out and turns and makes it so that it can get air, but it can't, organisms can't climb in there. And he put beef broth in that flask, and it sat there, and for months, and lo and behold, it didn't produce any life. While the beef broth that was just put out in a plain beaker, all of a sudden, a week or so later, it had maggots. And the reason, if you put a Gauze meth over the beaker, it produced maggots too, but they're not down in the broth. They were up on the gauze cover. So he began to establish some things and eventually led to pasteurization. All right. But we want to look at what different explanations. Every worldview has its own explanation of how life came about. The Christian, Judeo-Christian worldview, Pam's going to nail it, God did it. After all, if you're in Bible class and you don't know the answer to the question, it's either God, Jesus, or the Bible. Unless you've got a teacher like me that makes you think about what you really mean by that. It's just not enough to say God did it. Because if you're talking to somebody whose worldview has been scrambled, and they're still in the process of forming it, and they've heard one thing at church and one thing at school and something else from their friends and something else from the guy down the block, or particularly if they go to medical school and they get into some of the medical school classes, they're going to hear a lot of different explanations. And so there are different people with different worldviews have different ideas about how life originates. And we're going to look at three of them this morning, besides the Christian worldview. And we're really going to just kind of hold that one in abeyance till next week. But let's start with naturalism. Who can tell me what the basic tenet, the basic belief of a naturalistic worldview is?
Big blast theory and evolution.
So,
Big blast theory and evolution.
well, they don't like the big blast theory because it proves them wrong. What'd you say, Jim?
It just happened.
It just happened. Or there are sometimes But they start out, the only thing that's real is the physical world. Only things that you can see, hear, taste, touch, and feel are real. Other things are not real. So they have a real hard time explaining things like love and some of the higher actions of human beings. They come up with other explanations, but we won't go there right now.
Have you ever asked AI what the worldview is?
No, I haven't.
Can I read you a sentence?
Read me a sentence.
I think this is actually what naturalism is. All life on earth can be traced back to a last universal common ancestor, or Luca. A study suggests that this organism likely lived on Earth 400 million years after its formation.
Okay.
But where did it come
That
from?
came from AI.
Yeah.
Well, that's different than what I would have expected it to say. It might have, and I suspect, the thing you need to realize about AI has no value system. Its worldview is the worldview of the people who created it, who programmed it. So it's whatever their view is, put in, encapsulated into the computer to be able to formulate answers based on that basic worldview. I know Daniel did his dissertation on artificial intelligence and ethics and so forth, and I guess it gets down to the basic question: can a machine become a sentient being? And so when you can answer that, Bill, well, let me know. We'll write a book. All right. But the naturalist view says it had to happen naturally. Well, when you look at nature, chemical compounds are combining and dividing all the time. That's what chemical compounds do. So, if you have enough time, then the natural process is that the chemical compounds will combine and they will produce the chemicals necessary to be life. Now, one of the questions you have to ask when you get something like that, and if you're dealing with someone who, and you can't see this, or this didn't come through worth a flip either. Maybe it's better on the screen. What are the odds of life coming about that way?
Astronomical.
Well, nobody's ever calculated that because it's absolutely too complex. Nobody's managed to do that. But one group, and I forget where, I got the reference out of John Clayton's book, but where he got it from, he wasn't clear, although I think it's from the guy he just quoted. But to make one protein, not life, but one protein molecule, the odds are 1 in 10 to the 160th power. Now what does that mean?
10
Which is
10
infinitesimal.
10
Yeah, 10 times itself or 160 times. So it'd be 10 with 160 zeros. I don't know how you would even go about saying a number that big, because the biggest I know is a lot smaller than the Google something.
Gagillion.
A Gagillion, which is a whole lot smaller than that.
Yeah.
Now, just to make things interesting, you have to, how much time would be required for that to happen?
Billions and billions of years.
Well, somebody did figure that, or just, because you could take how chemicals react and so forth, and the time it takes for reactions to occur, and that would be 1 in 10 to the 274th power. And that is more time than even the longest time that anybody says the universe has been in existence. About 18 billion years is the upper limit on that from, and this is from the Big Bang people, who are not necessarily our enemies. They do say there was a beginning. But the outer limit that way is 18 billion. The lower limit on that is about 4 billion. So that's the 1 in 10 to the 247th power is a lot longer than that. I don't know how long that would be. So if we're going to say it happened naturally, without any kind of interference, we're going to have to come up with some explanation other than time and normal chemical elements. We were able, back about 40 years, back in the 50s, one chemist was able to build a device that produced an amino acid. Now, what is an amino acid to life?
A building block. Protein.
It's part of what makes up a protein, but it's not a whole protein.
No.
Proteins are made up of amino acids.
Yeah.
And, there's a bunch of them. There's 17 that are essential to human life. We have to have in our diet. There are not any in the cows, by the way. Cows can make their own. That's why being a rumen helps in that regard, ruminant. But anyway, he built this thing, but that produced some amino acids. The problem was the environment was so harsh, the amino acids didn't survive more than just a nanosecond. And so he gets through and says, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I can't answer that. Okay, well, naturalists are not the only people that try to answer this question of how did life begin. Postmodernist people have a different explanation, or they don't really. They say we can't possibly know. It just happened. And it's unimportant anyway. Because how life began has no consequence. Makes no difference to us because what? Our community determines what we believe about it. And our community sets the standards, and therefore that's all that's important. And so this question is of no consequence. Well, my question is, if the question is of no consequence, why does it keep occurring? Why do people keep asking the question? Any ideas?
Because they're not satisfied with the answer that it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Humans are curious people. We want to know.
Let's look at another worldview. And this one is actually, you'll run into some of this sometimes. New spiritualism. What's the basic tenet of new spiritualism?
Never heard of it.
There's nothing different between that rock and that plant.
That's right. The rocks and the hills and the trees and all have spirits, and therefore it's all part of the same spiritual universe. And so it's just an accident as to that some things are what we call living and some things aren't. And the living organism may be recycled as a non-living object, and the non-living object may recur as a living organism. What is the thing that you would think is the Achilles heel of that argument?
Well,
If that's the case, and we just keep recycling, then what about the universe? How long's it been here?
long time.
Forever?
Forever is their point of view, that it's always been here.
There's not a beginning,
And-
not an end. Yeah.
It hasn't been here all that time. Why, Mike?
Depends on their view.
But there is a lot of agreement that it had to have a beginning. It all began at one point. And
Time is an element that says that this is incorrect.
yeah,
Time.
and there's something else. And I'll just mention this and you can go research it. There are some laws out there called the laws of thermodynamics. They're among the best supported laws of all science, particularly the second law of thermodynamics. And rather than ask you what it says, it's roughly speaking, it says that in a closed system, energy always moves from an organized state to a disorganized state. In other words, everything wears out. So what would happen if the universe existed forever?
It would be a mess.
It would eventually become an absolutely cold, absolutely empty nothingness. And that law has been supported so much over all the scientific exploration we've been doing since the 1600s that it's no longer a theory, or it is a law. It is accepted as being absolutely true. And everything we know, including our own bodies, does what?
Wears out.
Wears out.
Yep.
So, even the sun will wear out. They say, some people say, and there's a big debate over this, so no one group of scientists is going to come right out and say, but most of them will agree that the sun has consumed approximately half of the amount of fuel it had to start with. So it's been going for 8 billion, 4 billion, whatever, 18 billion, whatever. That means it's about how much time left.
Same amount of time you just expressed.
Yeah. You know what that means? They're going to be finishing that project up at 34 and 45 in the dark.
Truth to that.
Okay. Open your Bibles, please. And I need a couple of readers here. and I did not put this on a slide because it's too long. I want you to go to Genesis chapter 1. Begin in verse 11. And Bill, why don't you start out? And you kind of read until you get tired, and then we'll go to Sharon.
Okay.
Yeah, she's got a good, strong voice. And then maybe come over here to Jim to finish it up. Okay?
Okay, if I can find 11. Okay. I'll start with 10. God called the dry ground land and the waters seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the land sprout with vegetation, every sort of seed-bearing plant, and trees that grow seed-bearing fruit. These seeds will then produce the kinds of plants and trees from which they come. And that is what happened. The land produced vegetation, all sorts of seed-bearing plants and trees with seed-bearing fruit. These seeds produced plants and trees of every kind. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed and morning came, marking the third day. Then God said, let lights appear in the sky to separate the day from the night. Let them be signs to mark the seasons, days, and years. Let these lights in the sky shine down on the earth. And that is what happened. God made two great lights, the larger one to govern the day, and the smaller one to govern the night. He also made stars. God set these lights in the sky to light the earth, to govern the day and night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And evening passed and morning came, marking the fourth day. Then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water, and every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply. Let fish fill the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. And evening passed, and morning came, marking the fifth day. Then God said, let the earth produce every sort of animal, each producing offspring of the same kind, livestock, small animals that scurry along the ground, and wild animals. And that is what happened. God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock, and small animals, each able to produce offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good.
Okay. Well, Sharon and Jim, you all can relax.
Sorry about that.
I knew you wouldn't get tired.
What is we said back, all the way back in lesson 2? All truth, and that's all information, is what?
God breathed.
It's a gift from God. All truth, all information is a gift from God. What does nature say about that?
It confirms it.
Proves it.
If you go to a truly naturalistic viewpoint, They're going to tell you life occurred where? First.
In the ocean,
What did God say? Where did life occur first?
on the land.
Plants.
Plants.
You know what? You cannot have animal life if you don't have plants.
Yeah.
They have to occur first, because that's the food source. So for life to occur in the ocean, there first had to be plants. And those plants originated on the earth, on the dry ground. Now, this is just, when you come to discussing this and describing this with someone, and you're trying to get them to stop and think about what they're saying, because you're not going to find anybody, or rarely will you find anybody, who just takes one of the worldviews we're contrasting here and comes purely out of that. They're going to come with a mixture of things. What can you ask them? What can you point to as being the difference between life and non-life? That is universal, that is undisputed, indisputed, however you say that, and that everyone recognizes.
Order.
Well, order, but order doesn't come without information. Order arises from information. Information is what drives it. Information is what explains the difference between living and non-living. Now, there's another statement that is an axiomatic truth. And this doesn't come from the Bible or from this comes from philosophy, from logic. Truth cannot contradict truth. Now, we're going to talk about that some more in our next lesson, in particular, because as we start dealing with how we explain the Christian worldview, a lot of times we come into conflicts. We produce conflicts between things that are held to be true. And we cannot deal with it. So what they did in the Bible class that I attended as a senior in high school here at the Church of Christ on Ennis Avenue was to make fun of and say those people are just lying. Well, those people seem to have a whole lot more going for them than a not so good plumber who didn't have much of a reputation in town. It didn't do anything to build my life of faith, and it certainly didn't understand anything, help me understand things. But truth cannot contradict truth. So if you have a truth about how old the rocks are in the Grand Canyon and how deep it is, saying that that is not true because it's got to have been 6 24-hour days, and we just read why it couldn't be 6 24-hour days. What happened? First there was life, and then what?
And they produced.
Huh?
It produced.
Yeah, it produced, and all was going well, and then God said something else is needed.
Well, he's not.
Then it was the 4th day before the sun, moon, and stars became apparent. Now, they were probably out there because light came into existence on the first day.
Yeah, he just divided everything up on the first day.
But it was not where you could tell time by it. And so when you are run into a situation where there seems to be two truths that are in opposition to each other, what are the options?
They're both wrong.
They're both wrong.
One is not
One
right.
is.
One is right and one is wrong. Or I don't understand the issue. And we're reluctant to accept that third option, I guess it's third option, or fourth option, as the one that's true. But that's the one that is more likely to be true because we know it, none of us know everything about everything. So when we come into conflicts, let's don't just make fun of the other point of view. Let's reason and look at it rationally, because truth always is rational. Okay? What time is it? It's about
22.
time.
9:41.
Well, good. We got about 4 minutes for y'all to comment or whatever. And next week we'll go into concluding this. We're going to look at more along the line of information, and look at one of the facts about information and truth that helps us determine what our worldview should be. But let's go right now, just let you have a chance to react and respond to this morning's lesson.
Well, if you peel away all the layers, it really just boils down to they don't want to be accountable to God for how they live their lives.
I'm convinced that's right in some cases, Sam, but in some cases, that's not necessarily true. In some cases, there are good and honest people who that's just their belief. Just like you will meet good, honest, upright Hindus who really believe the Hindu myth of creation. By the way, I'm using that in a technical term, not the common where you just think a myth is something that's not true. And the academic definition of a myth is an explanation that's accepted without proof. So creation myth in Genesis is the Christian myth, in an academic way of referring to it. What else you got to say?
So if you talk with someone for long periods of time, maybe even over years, with your explanations of truth and logic, and they refuse, what does the Bible say about those people?
Well, I think the Bible's pretty clear. At first, everyone has the right of choice. And that right's not yours to confer or deny. That is a right given by God. But for every choice, there are what?
Consequences.
There are consequences. The consequences of choosing wrong are not what? They're not good. And so there are times, April, when you just simply have to say, I'm not going to influence this person, and simply go on your way.
In the Bible, you know, during Christ's time, his apostles were told, if they don't receive your message leave that village and shake the dust off of your shoes as a sign of contempt for them.
Yes.
And sometimes, years later, the seed that you planted will, bear fruit. Morris and his best friend were the only two Christians in the biochemistry department at University of Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't convert a soul there. They were mistreated and, it
I know what you're talking about.
It did not go well. When Morris died, I got a letter from a man that had been a fellow student who said he never had been around anybody that was as pleasant and kind but sure of his faith as Morris and David were. And it opened the door a little bit. And through the years, other people, opened the door a little more. And he had become a Christian, had married a Christian woman, had, was giving, but it was just the little seed. So we don't know that,
You don't
what
know.
we've done 20 years later or 50 years later.
There's just certain rules.
Yeah,
Things that are axiomatic, and I know time's up. Don't deny the truth.
yeah,
Don't argue or don't insult the person.
yeah,
You can say, no, that is ridiculous, and then but you have a right to believe it.
yeah,
And then just, you sometimes have to separate yourself to protect yourself, but you don't know what impact you will have. I can tell you the story of the conversion-proof people I've encountered in my life.
yeah.
I can tell you a story about one guy that was been a friend of mine for years. I went hunting with him in Illinois. Very religious, they believe in God and everything. They believe in creation, that God created millions and millions and millions of
They
years.
found it inside the single cell.
Okay.
It was something
When I
else.
said, well, they said,
It's something else.
Okay.
And so, you just went,
God has all
Protons and ions and then
Okay.
electrons.
I'm all about
All the way down.
you know,
Okay.
well, yeah,